I am Sen,
And I am Sari.
and you are listening to Lonely People, a friendship podcast.
Wow,
Today's topic is about being open-minded to having different types of friendships in your life, not just the ones that you envisioned.
that was beautiful. Uh, yeah, exactly. So I think we've kind of mentioned this on previous episodes, but because it's come up a few times, we kind of decided to just make it its own topic. We've mentioned like different people in our lives and friends and family and stuff and how they've affected us. And we kind of saw a pattern of like one of the things which I think has made us successful and having a community is being open to having multiple types of friends. And, I'll tell my story on that first. Like, I was not always open to that, honestly, when I was younger, and I think that's just because I had a lot of friends already, and so I didn't feel the need to be open to other people. I was just like, "Yeah, I'm cool. I've got my friends. Everything's good." Um, but eventually, like, you do have to learn to make the effort and stuff, and there came a time when a large part of the reason that I wasn't making friends and stuff was just because I had, like, an image in my mind of what I expected my life to look like and who I expected to be part of it and all that kind of thing. And if someone didn't immediately match that image, I just was like, no, none of that." And I think, to be fair, there's a tiny bit of like that and a very small dose is healthy because to some degree, there's some people who would be harmful to you, and it's good to have a filter and it's like, "Oh, no, that's harmful. I don't want that in my life." But you can take that way too far. And I definitely took that way too far. And my filter was just like only people who seem super interesting and align with me in all ways. So, I eventually had to learn to just look at people and listen to them and just let them be people. And especially, like, if someone's kind to me, I should automatically be kind to them. And a lot of times that turns into a friendship.
Yeah, I totally agree with Sarah on that one. It's really easy for us to kind of get closed-minded, but like we want in our friend group, or like what how we idolize, I guess, what we expect our friends to be. So like in my case, back in when I was in high school, I was part of this English class, and like there was these group of girls who were like the nerdy girls of the class, like really book nerds, really passionate about like I don't know, like all the nerd things, and then there were like the hipster kids. And I so badly wanted to be part of the hipster kids group. And I'm talking like hipster, like floral print bags, like really moody, like really reading like really high level literature but to talk about it in like, I don't know, very hipster ways. And like due to social media influence and like all these other things, I just wanted to be part of that crowd. So like I did my very best to like try to like morph my personality and myself to like fit into this group because I just so desperately wanted to be a part of it. And just like how the saying goes, of like the grass isn't always greener on the other side, that's how it came across. Where like I was part of this group, I was sitting with them at my English class, and like we all sat around and talked about things, but I didn't feel like they were part of my like community. Like I was just a person who was there, who they would acknowledge and like talk to, but like I wasn't there. I forced myself to become a part of their community, but like I wasn't actually a part of their community, and I wasn't happy there either. I came to find that I was kind of like, this isn't what I expected it to be. This isn't what I wanted it to be in the end. Um, so over the course of the English semester, like we had like kind of openish seating, so I just like found myself like eventually just hopping back and forth between the groups of like the nerdy girls and the hipster group until I eventually just like sat with the nerdy girls and stayed there because that's where I was the happiest and that's where I felt I felt my sense of community, and like that's where I felt like joy and happiness and like all of the like good emotions or like fruit of the spirit within this group of people. And like I still kind of occasionally talk to the hipster people through like the rest of my time of high school, but like I did really find like my expectations of like what I thought I wanted from this friend group did not lie with this hipster group of people whose main identifiers were being hipster, but were instead these group of like nerdy girls who just wanted to have fun and were just kind of really chill. So I think when we're coming to this topic of being open-minded, I think it's really easy for us to kind of become closed-minded and be like try to meet these expectations of like I want my friends to look like this, I want my friends to act like this, and in the end we're kind of like shooting ourselves in the foot in a sense or stepping on our own feet, trying to create this group of people that we are not meant to be around.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. And I think, yeah, that's exactly the case, that you're expecting someone to look a certain way or behave a certain way. But eventually I learned, like, I can kind of see why people feel that way because you're going on your own past experiences, and your past experience, you're like, oh, someone like this was cool. I want that again. And that's not a bad thing or anything, but it's just not always true. And then I've had so many positive experiences, like getting to know people who I wouldn't have thought that I would get to know. And then afterwards, it was really enriching, like just because people are cool for one reason, but then also if they are different than what you're used to or whatever, that's a whole nother perspective that you can fold into your life. And that's kind of beautiful too.
So kind of like on the note with what we're talking about, like when you are choosing to make friends, go about making friends, or even trying to integrate yourself into a friend group when you move, which is something I've had to deal with quite a bit recently. It's really important to try to not have bias when you're going to pursue these friend groups. Um, so with every single friend group that you meet, you never know which one in the end will actually become your community. It's kind of like one of those things of like where people say like, "Oh, try everything." I would say give everything a chance. Give every person that you meet, every group you meet, people you meet, a chance to become something of your life. It could be just like you guys meet one once. You guys meet once, you realize you don't vibe with each other, and then you can continue forward on your like journey of making friends. Or on the other hand, you meet once, and then you meet again, and you meet again, and you meet again, and then next thing you know, like you're part of this community, and like you're able to grow with one another, and like really just build each other up. Um, you don't really know like which one of these encounters will eventually lead to this friendship, but like if you are kind of in this like tight knit bubble of like I want my friends to, I'm gonna keep using the hipster example because like that's an easier enough identifier, I guess. So if you're like, if I only want my friends to be hipsters, and then you like cycle through every single hipster community in your area, and none of those people are your community, then you're kind of just left friendless in the end. But if you decide to branch out, maybe you do little branches. Like I'm gonna try people who are hipster skaters, or like I people in the hipster community also go to coffee shops, or I don't know, little
Mhm.
branches. I know it's kind of terrifying, but like if you take little steps outside of what you expect, you will be surprised by the amount of people who have really similar interests to you, or like maybe they don't, but like you're willing to learn about a new experience. And you'll begin to expand the amount of people who are part of your friend group or part of your tribe, as a lot of people like to say. Um, and you were able to kind of just grow in these opportunities and like I don't know, grow your friend group and like get a bunch of new experiences. And I'm rambling. But you guys should be able to grow and grow as a person and grow the people that you can consider like part of your friends.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think if you ask most people who who do have a healthy friend group and they are social and they do things and stuff, if you ask them like, when you first moved here or when you first started being part of this community or whatever, are these exactly the people you imagined you would be friends with? I think most people would say no, or at least not for all of them. For some of them, maybe, but not for all of them. And so that's just to prove that whatever image we have in our mind, it's just an image. It's not reality. So don't try to base all of your decisions on that. It's fine to feel that way, but it's not reality.
Another thing I would note as well, while still living with Sari before I moved away, um, I I was part of these dance communities and like was I had these expectations of like, what it's like to be part of these dance communities, but when I moved away and I rejoined these dance communities because that's what I'm familiar with, I came to find that it wasn't being the same people, the same personalities. My expectations were not met in terms of like who I would meet and like how they would behave. And if I let that derail me, I would not have the friends that I have today. Because I took the opportunity to not. I knew if I went in expecting to have the exact same friendships as I did when I was living with Sari, then I would not even have the friends that I have today because they're not the same people. Everyone has their own life experiences and like their own um perspectives on things, and like the friends I have here are so great, but I would never have met them if if I kept that same perspective of like, oh, they're not exactly what I wanted them to be. Um, so like I would say having an open mind, keeping an open mind of like who potentially can become part of your friend group helps a lot in the creation of friendships.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so then kind of following on that subject, I think Sen said like when you meet people or a group, it's good to give them at least one shot. And I think that's maybe a good rule of thumb. She's good at making rules of thumb. But anyway, that's a good one. Because when you first encounter someone, I know people are not always in the right state of mind to make friends, and that's fine. But when you first encounter someone, that is an opportunity in life that you may not get back again, and it's your opportunity to treat them kindly and be open-minded. Like, you don't know if that person is going to actually be really cool or whatever. And it's not fair to meet someone and immediately close them off. So at least the first time you meet someone, it's nice to at least like listen to them, see what they have to say, and just kind of get to know them. And if you get a bad vibe after enough times, that's fine. You have your own freedom of choice. But I think that's a decent way of looking at it. Just be open to people, at least when they're new in your life and stuff. And then continuing on that thread, I think people sometimes forget that everyone else is also a person. And so it would benefit all of us to just look at people as people and not like assets in our life. Everyone around you is not, they don't exist to make your life better, or they don't exist to be entertainment like a TV show. They're people with their own lives, just like you. And so it's best to just look at them as like, oh, look, there's a person. Maybe they'll be my friend. Maybe they won't be my friend. Maybe I'll never see them again. But all of those things relative to their life don't matter because they also have a full and complete life of things that they're doing outside of you. I just think that would be like a nice perspective for everyone to have before we start entering into relationships with these people.
Yeah, I think that concept not only applies to like friendships, but like relationships, they have in any uh regard type,
Yeah.
any nature. Friendships that you have in any kind of nature, like you don't want to go and approach those things being like, oh, like what do you like? What benefit do you have to me? Like, do you make me laugh all the time? Do you listen to me when I need someone to listen? Like, if you come to any form of relationship with that mindset, you're going to kind of create an emotional toll for that other person, and like, I think it's a whole separate topic in and of itself, really,
Yeah.
of being unselfish with, or like being selfless when you're pursuing these friendships or relationships, because comes a certain emotional debt if you're only interested in like this one particular aspect of someone.
Yeah.
There's no certain emotional debt, and like I feel like everyone wants to be able to go fully into a friendship or relationship, especially one that you want to be like really close to, being just yourself, and not having an expectation that I will provide you with something in order to maintain our friendship.
Yeah.
So having that level of selflessness uh, is something that's really, really beneficial, especially when you're like kind of approaching making these different kinds of friends, because they may not have the same perspectives as you, but like you're choosing to become you're not just choosing to focus on like one aspect of that friend that's different than you. You're just like, accepting you as a whole with all these different parts of you coming together, like kind of like a jigsaw puzzle or like a puzzle in general. You guys are a bunch of different pieces, and like you decide to like have that one linking piece. It could be you both like playing the violin. I don't know. Um, but like there's so many friendships that can grow from like that one linking point.
Mhm.
So like if I think really reality that one linking point just starts with being open to having this friendship in the first place, despite your differences.
Yeah. But that's a really good way of putting it, better than I had. That like you're not you're not seeing someone like it's not good to see someone just for one aspect of who they are. I hadn't thought to say it that way, but that's a good way of saying it. Like people are not just one aspect, they're all the aspects. And if you love that, I don't know, they like going to coffee shops and spending money on silly treats, but you don't love the other things about them. Like that's not entirely fair to them because they're also an individual. So it would be better to just take them as a whole and accept it as much as you can.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Also, pretty closely related to that, um, everyone has contributions in like whatever group you're in, if you're in school or work or whatever, everyone around you is contributing something. And that thing may not always be valuable to you, but it will be valuable to someone else and they still have value. And I think a lot of times those people who do something that you don't personally find valuable, like it's still nice that they're around. And I think your social environment would not be as nice with them around. Like, for example, I am not a super fun party person. And so I don't like love those really active jumping around games that people do and like very loud talking or like making super crazy desserts. None of those things really speak to me. particularly. But a lot of people love them, and some people love doing that. And the people who do that, they do that, and everyone else is just so happy and like some people come just because you're gonna make silly dessert there, you know, like and so this whole party exists because that one person who's super fun is doing that, and so people came. And I personally don't value it. It doesn't mean anything to me. But I am glad the party's there. So I should be grateful for that person and just be glad they're around. And I think that's true for everyone. Like everyone around you is doing something that's bringing a benefit to your environment and just like try to open your eyes and unbias yourself and just like see them for what they are. Oh, and I have a story about that. I had a coworker once who I didn't particularly get along with. I found him just a little irritating. Anyway, but one time I went to this big work event and his little niece came with him and she's like 8 or something. And she was like calling him uncle the whole time and like holding his hand and petting him and asking him stuff. And it was really sweet. And I saw and then I thought like, "Oh, people love him." Like, of course people love him. It never occurred to me because I didn't get along with him. But it was so stupid of me to not think like just because I don't get along with him doesn't mean people don't like him. Like, of course other people like him and like how selfish am I to only think of my own perspective? Of course there's a little girl somewhere in the world who calls him uncle and holds his hand. And it kind of made me like try not to be so judgmental to people who I don't get along with.
You hear, Sari, you hear. Yeah, and I think all of this closely relates to our Bible verse of the day. Um, and that comes from 1 Corinthians 12, verses 21 through 23. And it says, "The eye cannot say to the hand, 'I don't need you,' and the head cannot say to the feet, 'I don't need you.' On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable, and the parts that we think are less honorable we treat with special honor." Um, and to give you a little bit more context, this verse is kind of describing like the body of Christ and like how there's some opposition going along, but like like between the Jews and the Gentiles, like people who are Jewish, people who are non-Jewish. Um, and basically, Paul, who's the author of this little verse verse section, is basically saying that like just because like you don't see a value in something, that's because you don't see the value in something does not mean it's not valuable to the entirety of the body. As Sari was saying in her previous story, just because in that moment like Sari had some discontent with her coworker, but it doesn't mean that at large they are not valuable or have worth to other people. It's just in that one context. Um, there we see some like opposition, but like as a whole, like they are lovable and like they have value to society and they have offer all these things that we don't see because you only see them in that one context.
Mm.
And similar to these friends that we're meeting, like you don't like I can imagine there's a bunch of people who met me for the first time and I was having a horrible day and like they didn't like me at first, or like I actually know people who didn't like me at first. For whatever their reasons are, maybe because it's like the mill and they're like, "Oh, I heard this about you, so I don't like you up front." Or it's because like after they interacted with me through one time and I said something that they didn't like and they just decided they didn't like me. But over time, over multiple interactions or other scenarios, acts of God, really, we became friends. And like, I think this verse kind of encompasses that just because in certain contexts, we don't see the value in things, or you think that we don't need these things. That doesn't mean that they don't have as great as value to the entirety of the body, which in our context, we're using it in friendship. It just means that we may not be seeing like the greater picture of it, of that person.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good way of saying it. Yeah, we don't see the bigger picture of people because we only see them sometimes. And like if you're listening to this and your goal is like, "Oh, I'd like to have more friends. That would be nice." The truth is when you meet people, you're not seeing the big picture. You're just seeing a moment, and that's fine. You know, it is what it is. But we can at least have grace for people because the truth is we don't know what's going on. We don't know who they are all the time. We just know this one moment. And if we're going out there looking to connect with people, then assume the best and think good of people and think like, there's someone who loves that person. Maybe I can find that in this conversation. Whatever that is about them that's valuable. Maybe I'll find it. Maybe I won't find it and we just won't click. And that's okay too. But it does exist whether or not I see it. And like going from there, some of the some of the people who I do have like long-term friendships with or who I think are really cool. I didn't get along with him immediately when I first met them. And like sometimes you're in a group where you see the same people for a long time. Like let's see if I think of an actual example. But yeah, so I had a social group for a while in school that I went to, and there's a bunch of people there, and I originally joined because I knew a couple people, and then you meet more people, and they're also cool. But one of the people who I met the first time I met them, they just rubbed me the wrong way, and I was like, I don't know. I've had negative experience with people taking advantage of me before, and they just gave off that vibe. It was felt it, and I was like, no, none of that. And so I just never talked to them. But after years of being around the same people all the time, I eventually was in situations where you just had to talk to that person. But the more I did, the more I realized, first of all, my first impression was correct, and they do take advantage. But second of all, they're also a nice person, and I learned that um, they were pretty friendly and they're really nice. And despite the fact that they had some traits I didn't like, they actually were very honest. And so I found myself being able to say like, "Hey, I don't want you to do that. It makes me uncomfortable." And they were just like, "Okay," and they didn't do it again. And so it's like my initial reaction was too extreme. And then afterward, like there actually was a way to work around it and be friends, and we were friends. And they actually had like some amazing insight, and we became pretty close friends. And I asked them for advice, and it was a really beneficial friendship. But all that to say, like sometimes after you give someone a chance, then you realize like, wow, this is years I could have been friends with this person who's actually really cool that I've missed out on.
Yeah, but yeah, I definitely agree with Sari. Like there's certain sometimes there's the context that you meet a person in can really influence the way that you see them. I have this friend where I didn't really know them that well in advance. Like we were part of the same friend group. We probably had mutual friends, blah blah blah. But like a group of these friends were like, hey, like we should go on this trip together. So we all did, and we were like, out for a few days or whatever, and we ended up in a situation where we were just like the two of us together for like a really, we were in a kind of a closed space where we were just talking for a while, and I realized that they were incredibly, incredibly frustrating when you just had to talk to them on their own, and I was just so annoyed with this individual, and I was like, I genuinely thought in that moment that our friendship ended. Like I was beyond mad because it was being in this like one-on-one talking situation, and I was like, I cannot stand this person. Um, so I thought in that moment our friendship ended, because I was really mad at them in the context. But like afterwards, when we were back with the group again, it kind of resolved itself. Because in this context, like for me, like I know with this particular person that we are not made to be like bestest, closest friends. That is not the context I should be friends with this person. However, when we're in a group setting and like you have like a bunch of other people voicing their opinions as well towards this person, and like all of us riving on them for having really odd and peculiar opinions that are really oddly specific. It was really funny because like we could all make fun of them and like in a very lighthearted, joking manner. And I realized that like I cannot be friends with this person in the setting of like a one-on-one context because like we don't align in terms of what we think about. But like in a group setting, like I see like the value they have in a group in their friend group and like how much like they are like loved in their friend group. And like just because like I don't see like we can't get along in this like one-on-one set situation doesn't mean that they don't have value as a person. And I definitely see like how much value they added to our group. And like when I reflect back on that time period, I do really appreciate them being there for it because it made the whole trip more fun overall. But I do understand like in that context, like one-on-one, we don't need to have this one-on-one friendship. And like that's the thing too, like being open to friendships doesn't mean like you have to become besties with every single person that you are attempting to who's outside of what you generally expect. And that doesn't also mean that like just because you don't like someone in the friend group means you should kick them out either. Because just because you don't find value in someone doesn't mean that other people don't find value in that person as well. And you never know that you might be that person as well who someone else in your friend group doesn't get along with you, but they're deciding to keep you in because you hold value to the group.
Yeah, that's a good
Um,
point.
so sometimes you just have to like, in a sense, become selfless or like get over yourself, which sounds mean, but like sometimes that's what it takes. And if that's what it takes for you to like keep a cohesive group, um, sometimes that's what it takes. And like, yeah, I think that's kind of where I stand on that.
Yeah, I'm sure I've been the friend. I'm sure there have been times where I was the person that some people didn't necessarily want to hang out with, but I was part of the group and they kept me. I know for sure that's happened before. And I'm grateful that they did keep me because it was a fun time. And hopefully brought enough positive to the group that, it was worth it to everyone. But yeah, because of that, I would really much, I'd very much like to extend that same courtesy to other people, even if I don't prefer them being around. If the group as a whole benefits by them being there, cool, good for them. Um, yeah, and then from my life personally, I can say like it's good to have filters with your friends. Like it's good to have a filter as to who you let into your life because the truth is people who are in your life affect you, and so it's good to be discerning and not make connections that are really harmful. But I had to learn there's a difference between a moral filter of things that are harmful to you and a preference filter. And I used to definitely get these very confused. And I had a moral filter of like, everyone should have things in their life that they just think like that's really inappropriate. If that's around, I'm going to kind of not be around. Not that you can't ever see the person, but there are contexts and situations that maybe you prefer not to be part of. And I think that's healthy and good. But it's easy to take things you don't like and stick them in that category and say like, oh, that's offensive or it bothers me or I'm not willing to deal with that. But the truth is you just don't like it. And it's like that's not the same thing. Like, and I definitely did that because I was like a good person, and everyone's like, wow, Sari, she's such a good person. And you hear that enough times and you're just like, yeah, I make good choices. But eventually it's like, no, a lot of them are just choices. It's not good or bad. It's just a choice. And people who make a different choice are not inherently bad, and you have to let them in the same room with you and not treat them badly. And just be honest with yourself and say, like, do I dislike that thing about them because I think it's harmful to people around me, or do I dislike it because I dislike it? Really be honest about that.
Yeah. I think Siri has a good point because I feel like oftentimes you get those two things confused. And like I said earlier, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot because you are kind of hindering yourself from potential friendships. Um, Even like in my case, like there's certain people where I was like, oh, I don't want to hang out with this person because of XYZ, because they don't meet this expectation in my life, or like I think that they will be a not a bad influence, but like they just don't meet there's something that like the filter in my brain was like, nope, like they should not be friends. I shouldn't be friends with them because they don't meet my criteria. And like it actually took in that case years of that person just being around before I was like, okay, like you like wiggled your way past the filter enough for me to be like take interest in you, which sounds really entitled, I know. Um, I this is like when I had this is still back when I lived with Sari and I had like a lot of friends. I have grown since then. So I was like, oh, this person's like finally like been around long enough for me to like actually take interest in being friends with them. And they end up being like one of my closest friends right before I left. Um, and if I always think back to that friendship and I'm always like, why did I wait so long to become friends with this person? And it's because I was so judgmental. Um, of like they like my grievances or whatever, I don't even know what to call it at this point. My judgments, like these like filters I placed in my brain were not from like a moralistic, like, oh, like we don't get along with something that's like really deep core value of mine. It's more like my own preconceived judgments and biases that were preventing me from becoming friends with this person. Um, and like I kind of like regret that in a sense because I was missing out on like what it could have been even a longer friendship. I mean, you're still friends now, but like what could have started as an earlier friendship prior to that point because I
Mhm.
had these like blockers in my brain.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think maybe one of the last points I will make is kind of on that subject. Like, don't confuse your preference filters with real, actual, meaningful filters that you should have, because it is good to have those. Um, at the same time, I want to kind of add as a caveat to all of this, it is good to have filters. It is good to, um, like, don't take inclusion too far to the point where just like everything's okay no matter what, because I think we should be pretty inclusive, like especially in a public setting where you're safe and nothing bad can happen to you. I think be inclusive. Like what harm can it do except maybe you'll feel uncomfortable. Um, but there are some contexts in which it is unsafe to be entirely inclusive, and it's good to be aware of that and to make smart choices. And then also just your heart and your spirit are you only have one, so keep it whole and don't ruin yourself. And so it's also good to have filters. Be open as much as you can, but there are some things that are not okay. If someone is obviously and clearly abusive and you feel like you should never be alone together, that's probably a correct sense that you should probably listen to. And so I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but don't take this advice too far and just be crazy open minded. But
No, yeah, I totally agree with Sari here. Like know yourself. If you're a praying person, pray about it, use discernment, pray for wisdom. Pray over your friends. That's actually a good point. Like always pray over
Yeah.
like, did I pursue this friendship or not? Or like pray even if you're are friends with someone, pray like whether or not you should keep them. Very, 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 very carefully listen and discern that voice in your head though. 'Cause I feel like some of you are like, I'm gonna cut that person off. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying pray over these friendships, pray that the Lord, if they're not saved or whatever and you're Christian, like pray over them that they may find the Lord. If they're not a praying person, then I don't know, discern.
Use your
There's
life
still like,
experiences.
yes, use your life experiences. Um, with regardless of where you're coming from, like from your live life experiences, from your using prayer, there's going to be a filter in your life of how you choose friends. Um, and we're in this podcast and this episode specifically is kind of talking about like moving away from those filters and like being a little bit more open, or maybe opening them up your filters up a little bit more to who you allow in. But also like we're not saying completely like strip it away. Use
Yeah.
discernment. Don't let people run you down and abuse you because they take advantage of you. That's not what we're getting at here. Um,
Yeah.
be a little bit
Correct.
level-headed when you make these decisions.
Yeah, maybe the point that we're really trying to make here is like work on your filter, you know? Like maybe your filter is too closed off because most people I know well who I've really talked to, I would say more people have a filter that's too closed off than one that's too open. So more likely than not, you're on the side of being too closed off. And so I would say take an honest look at the filter of how you make friends and maybe open that up a little bit because it's probably too closed off. But if you're on the other end and your filter is too open, you can work on that too and maybe not invite harm into your life either.
Yes. But for the majority of you, we're saying open up your filter. The minority, will work. You guys can
Yeah,
close it
I
up a
think
little
that's a different episode. I don't know how to talk about that one, but
bit. All right. So basically, in summation, in summary, in conclusion, as your English teachers would tell you to say, um, it's good to have different types of friends in your life. They enrich you in ways that you may never have thought they would. I totally, this is really a really random last thing to add in the moment. But like, I never would have probably gone snowboarding or skiing if I never made friends with people on the surf team. And like, that's not something from Florida I would ever have interest in. But being open to new experiences, new ideas, new opportunities, allows you to grow your friend group and like become friends with people you may have never expected or never have met if you never gave them a chance to begin with. Um, so just open up your filter, allow more people in that you may have not have considered before. I mean, may not look like you, talk like you, sound like you. Because like you never know which one of these people might potentially become like your best friend, essentially.
mm, yes, that is a beautiful conclusion.
All right. So if you liked this podcast episode, make sure to follow us at Lonely People, a friendship podcast. Once again, I am Sen.
And I am Sari.
Thank you guys for listening.